the IELTS Masterclass for the writing module this evening. My name's Tina and I'm talking to you from Melbourne this afternoon. Let's just do a quick audio test as we get started. So if you can hear me, please use the raise hand icon. And if you can't hear me, please use the X icon. And you can use the raise hand icon at any time during the webinar to alert myself or the moderator to any technical problems that you might be having. So as I said before, we're going to be talking about the writing module this evening, and my name's Tina, and I look forward to sharing my IELTS knowledge with you. I'm going to talk to you tonight about both the academic and the general training module in writing. And I'm going to give you some practical tips for both of those tests. I'm also going to talk to you about how you'll be scored. So hopefully the band descriptors that the examiners use when they're assessing your writing won't be such a mystery anymore. And I'll also talk to you about some costly mistakes that you can avoid making. There is a questions panel. So if you've got any questions that I don't cover in the presentation material, please type your questions in there and I'll spend the last 15 minutes of the webinar answering any questions that I haven't covered in the presentation material. There's also a live polling feature, so keep your eye on the right-hand side of your screen and I'll be instructing you when to enter in your responses. Now, hopefully by now, you'll all have downloaded the contents of your masterclass pack. A link was sent to you, hopefully when you registered, but there's also a link in the chat box there where you can access that. Towards the end of that masterclass pack, we have what we call the public version of the band descriptors, and we'll be using those band descriptors during this webinar, so have them handy if you can. The contents of the masterclass pack is basically a summary of what I'll be talking to you about today. There are some example writing questions and answers, as well as other information about the speaking, listening, and reading modules. The main thing I want to communicate to you today is that learning English is a slow, long-term process. So to improve your English, you need to be using it every day in as much everyday context as you can. Speak it with your friends, write notes and emails in English, read English newspapers, listen to English radio and television, all of those things that you know you should be doing. Anything you do in English is going to help you with particularly with your writing and with your speaking. It's important that you do practice tests, and some people like to do IELTS preparation courses, which are very useful to you if you're new to taking the test. But if you've taken the test before and you haven't got the score you need, then doing another IELTS preparation course won't help you, because IELTS preparation courses only maximise the English skills that you already have. You need to have a sound foundation of the English language to build on. So IELTS preparation won't necessarily improve your English language skills. It will help you to know what to expect and what to do in each step of the test, but you need to do more than just practice tests to help improve your score. Now, each component of the IELTS test has different types of questions that require particular skills to answer. So, for example, in the academic task 1 module, the skill you're being tested on is your ability to write a report and to transfer visual information into text. Okay, so you've got to be aware of the skills you're being tested on. And of course, in both the general training and the academic module, you're being tested in task 2 on how well you can write an essay. I want to show you how the band descriptors tell us a lot about the assessment of the speaking and the writing components of the test. So looking at these descriptors should help you to understand how examiners assess your performance using the analytical scales. As with any test, examiners are looking for particular skills. So we'll look more at those skills as we go on. I'll also help you to avoid some common mistakes, and I don't just mean errors in spelling and grammar. I mean more serious mistakes resulting from a lack of knowledge of the skills which are being tested. Things like not covering all the 3 bullet points in the general training task 1, for example. I'll go into more detail with that later. As part of your IELTS preparation, you need to determine which test is more suitable to you. Is it the academic or the general training module? Most of you will have completed the academic test in the past and you'll know it well. You might not have looked at the general training test and the differences between the two. So if you're taking the test to enter the workplace in Australia, Canada, or another country, then you might have the option of doing the general training version. The version of IELTS you take and the score you need will totally depend on your visa requirements. So you'll need to check that out. And it will also depend on the requirements of the institution at which you plan to study at, or your employer or your profession. So make sure you research that. And if your degree is in a discipline such as IT or engineering, which has placed more emphasis on your numerical skills than your literacy skills, you might find that the general training version is a better way to demonstrate your English language skills. Now, having the general training version is very unique to the IELTS test. So when you are taking the IELTS test for migration purposes, you do have this unique choice. And the difference between the two versions of IELTS lies in the subject matter and the different skills required for each version. So there's a different writing module. There are different writing tasks for the academic and the general training module. And there's also a difference in the reading test as well, but the speaking and the listening are the same. Now for the writing, let's have a look at both formats. There are 2 tasks in both the academic and the general training module. In the academic module, you've got task 1 and task 2. You've got 60 minutes to complete both of those tasks. Task 1 is where you have to write a short report. You'll have to summarise some information that's presented in a visual format. Could be in a graph, a chart, or a diagram, or it could be some pictures, and you'll need to transfer that visual information into text. And task 2 is an essay, giving your opinion. And I can't stress that strongly enough, giving your opinion. That's the English language skill that you are being tested on. In the general training module, again, 60 minutes to complete 2 tasks. Task 1 is a letter and task 2 is an essay, giving your opinion. So that's what you need to be practicing in your preparation, how to express your opinion clearly. Now, if you've located those band descriptors in the masterclass pack, I hope you've got them handy because we're going to be referring to them throughout this section of the masterclass. Now, we're going to identify the writing skills that you need to achieve a band 7 or higher in the test. And I'm also going to highlight some of the common mistakes which could prevent you from reaching the score you need. Your written tasks are assessed on 4 criteria. So each column of the handout relates to one of the 4 assessment criteria. Now, each row of the handout describes a band score, and the way the candidate gets that band score is how well you can perform against that criteria. Now, each criteria is equally important and worth 25% of the mark for each task. So you've got 25% for task achievement, that's for task 1, and task response, which is for task 2. And what this means, task achievement or task response, this basically means the examiner is looking at how well you have answered the question. Have you done exactly what the question has asked you to do, and how well have you done that? Coherence and cohesion means how well does your message flow? Have you used linking words to join your ideas together? Can we understand what you're saying? Have you used paragraphing and signalling words to make the relationship between your ideas clear? Lexical resource is your vocabulary. So again, have you used a wide range of words to express yourself precisely, or have you used the same words repetitively? And it's the same with grammatical range and accuracy. The examiners are checking to see if you use a mixture of simple and complex sentences, and again, the range of grammar structures you've used and how accurately you've used them. So if we look at those band descriptors, we're going to identify the writing skills that you need to achieve a band 7 or higher in the test. I'm also going to alert you to some of the common mistakes which could prevent you from reaching the band score you need. So if we look in that band 7 range there for grammar, for grammatical range and accuracy, you'll see that one of the first things it says is uses a mixture of simple and complex sentences. So what do we mean by that? So if we have a look at these 4 sentences here, I liked my high school, my teachers were good, my best subject was science, I became a scientist. These are all simple sentences, and we can change these 4 simple sentences into 2 complex sentences. I liked my high school because my teachers were good. My best subject was science, which is why I became a scientist. So that's what we mean by complex sentences. And again, there's not a specific number of complex sentences that you have to use to achieve a certain band score. It's just how you end up using them overall. So please don't ask me how many complex sentences do I have to use. There is no answer to that question. All right, let's have a look at the academic task 1. And you need to be thinking about what skills you have to demonstrate to get band 6 or above, and what are the common mistakes that you can avoid. So the information that you get in the academic task 1, it'll be presented to you in a number of different visual formats. So think of this task as essentially an information transfer task. You're given information in a visual format and it has to be converted into text. So try to imagine that you have to report on what you can see to someone that you're talking to on the phone who can't see the visual. You have to identify the key information, the key features, and give a summary to that person. You should only spend 20 minutes on this task, as it only counts for 1/3 of the total mark. And you need to write 150 words. So make 150 words your minimum, and between 170 and 180 words your maximum. Please don't think that the more you write in IELTS, the better you will do. These questions are designed to be answered within that recommended word count. Now let's have a look at a typical academic task 1 question. Now this example is asking you to compare 2 related graphs. There's a bar chart and a line graph describing the number of Japanese tourists travelling in a 10-year period. Now, that first paragraph will give you a description about what you're looking at. And the second paragraph there, where it says summarise the information, this is the question. This is the task that you're being asked to do. Summarise the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. But this is what you're going to be assessed on in that task achievement column, how well you can summarise information and how well you can select and report the main features, and if you can make comparisons where relevant. So there are 3 rules of writing that you need to keep in mind. So when you approach the task, the first thing you do is you have to set the scene and provide a context. So you have to write an introduction. Okay? The second rule is to highlight the features, the key features with figures. And the third rule is to write an overview. So please don't copy the text that's written in the question. Please don't copy that and directly put that into your answer. You need to paraphrase that first paragraph. So what I'm talking about, if we go back to the question, I'm talking about this first paragraph here. Let me just highlight this paragraph. Don't copy any of that text directly. What you need to do is paraphrase it and change the grammar structure so that you're saying the same thing but in a completely different way. If you were to copy this and put that into your answer, those words won't be counted in your word count, okay? So never ever copy any text directly from the questions. So if we have a look here, 3 things that you've got to include in your introduction is the what, the where, and the when. Okay, so this skillfully includes what we saw written in the question, and at the same time, it adapts the grammar to suit the new sentence structure. And there's no need to explain what the X and the Y axis is to the examiner, okay? So the first masterclass rule is to write an introduction. What was the second rule? It was to highlight the key features with figures, as in this sample answer. So pay attention to the numbers that are used to present the data. So this candidate has chosen to describe the bar chart first and then the line graph. So the bar chart was measured in millions. So pay attention to the units of measurements that are used because it's important to present the data correctly. You'll lose marks if you were to write about it in thousands and not millions, for example. So when we talk about the key features, we're talking about the most important information that you see. So what's the least of something? What's the most of something? So always talk about where the figures start, always talk about where they finish, and talk about the trends, similar trends. And there might be a counter trend. So we saw a slight drop. If we go back to that graph, we can see the way it's been described here. There was a slight fall in 1991. So that's what this candidate has chosen to talk about, okay? So remember, with the key features, the most of something, the least of something, what the general trend is, and are there any counter trends? Now let's go to those band descriptors to do a bit of a practical task. What's the highest score for task achievement you can get if you don't include features to highlight the key figures? So if you don't include figures in your academic task 1 essay, what's the highest score you can get for task achievement? So have a look at those band descriptors. Look at the academic task 1 and look in that first column. So just skim your eye down that first column and look for highlighting key features. I'll come back to that poll in a moment. Okay, so as I said, this candidate chose to describe the bar chart first and then the line graph. So this was the description of the line graph. Again, remember, we start with the least of something. We talk about where the graph started. We talk about where it ended. And again, what was the similar trend and was there any counter trends? And there was a slight fall in 1990. So again, the data, the units of measurement that were used for this graph was percentages. So again, you'll lose marks for inaccuracy. So make sure that you write the figures and the ranges correctly. And always make sure that you use numbers to support your description. So I asked you what was the highest score. for task achievement that you can get if you don't include figures to highlight key features. And the answer was a band 5. Most of you got it correct. Some of you who said a band 6, have a look again at those band descriptors. There's no way, some of you put a band 7 or a band 8. There's no way you would get a 7 or an 8. You won't even get a 6 if you don't include data to support your description. So it's very important. Looking back at those band descriptors again, what's the highest score for task achievement if you don't include an overview in your answer? So if you don't include an overview in your answer, what's the highest score that you can get for task achievement? So again, look in that first column only, that task achievement column. Don't bother looking in band 7 or band 8 because there's no way you'll achieve those marks if you haven't included an overview. Band 7 says presents a clear overview. So there's no way you'll achieve a band 7. What about band 6? No, again, we can see in band 6, it says presents an overview. So you have to go down, look below a band 6. That's my little clue for you. So what is an overview? You've got to always write one, and you need to think about an overview as a summary of the most important message, and it's usually written in just one sentence. You can put your overview straight after your introduction if you want to, or in the conclusion, as in this example. It doesn't matter where it appears in the report, but it must be there. So we don't use any data. We don't put any numbers in our overview. Think of the overview as a summary of everything that you've just written. It's the most important information in a nutshell. And the skill of writing an overview is also assessed in the task achievement scale. So when I asked you what score can you achieve if you don't include an overview in your answer, the answer is a band 5, which most of you saw there. Someone said a band 7, but you'll only get a band 5 where it says recounts detail mechanically with no clear overview. You might have attempted an overview but not done it very well. That still might get you a band 6, but if you haven't included one at all, you'll only get a band 5. So let's have a look at a summary of what you need to make sure you've done in the Academic Task 1 module. The examiner can read how many words you've written, so make sure you write at least 150 words. Make 150 your minimum and between 170 and 180 your maximum. Make sure that you've included an overview. Think of your overview as a summary of everything that you've just written. It's the most important information in a nutshell. Have you made effective comparisons? The task instruction says make comparisons where relevant. So if you can compare the information, try and do so, okay? And make sure that you only select the most important information. It's asking you to highlight the key features. So just the main features. What's the most of something? What's the least of something? Are there any counter trends during it? Make sure you use linking words to connect your ideas. Remember that your answer must be written in connected text. You'll lose marks if you write in note form or if you use bullet points or dot points or numbered lists. Okay, so remember your introduction is only going to be one sentence. I would write that one sentence, leave a line, and then begin your description, whether you have 2 or 3 sentences for your description or 4 or 5 sentences for your description. I would then leave a line and write the overview just to show the examiner that you've got an idea of the correct format. And make sure you've only got 20 minutes for this task, so make sure you leave enough time to check for mistakes in grammar and spelling. Some common mistakes that candidates make is they don't support the description with figures. They don't use data to support what they're writing about. Candidates also try and interpret the data. So they also try to say why they think the information is the way it is. That's not what you're being asked to do, okay? Only describe the data, don't interpret it. The task tells you to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features, and the task is designed to be completed in 150 words or so. So if you write more than 200 words, then you've probably not been selective enough and you've included too much detail. You should aim to identify trends or patterns rather than describing every single change that occurs. Not writing an overview is another mistake that candidates make. So remember, that's a very important skill that you're being tested on. And during candidates, when they're preparing, during their preparation time, candidates will look at lots of graphs, they'll look at lots of bar charts, and then on the day of the test, they're given a process that they have to describe. So please make sure in your preparation that you look at some process style questions. So if you have to describe a process, for example, how bees make honey, you'll have a series of pictures to describe. So make sure that you identify all the stages of the process and you don't miss any out. You'll also need to include an overview, and that overview will state how many stages are involved in that process. So examiners will be assessing how well you use sequencing words to make clear the order of the stages in the process. So you'll be using words like the first stage, the following stage, after that, next, in the final stage. And your ability to do that is rated under coherence and cohesion. But there is an example process task in the masterclass pack, so make sure you have a look at that. All right, let's move on to general training task 1. As I mentioned before, it's a letter and you have to write at least 150 words. So as with the academic module, make 150 words your minimum and between 170 and 180 your maximum. Remember, these tasks are designed to be completed in the recommended word count. And you've only got 20 minutes. Please don't spend any more time than 20 minutes on this, as it only counts for 1/3 of your score for writing. Now, the purpose of the letter is to give you a situation that you have to respond to. So, for example, you might have to give your opinion about something and suggest a course of action, or you might be dissatisfied with something and you want to write a letter complaining about the situation, or you might be asked to write a letter to a friend inviting them to stay with you and suggesting when they should come. It will always be a situation that you have to respond to. So as you can see in this example, the situation is outlined. And after that, you're given clear instructions in the form of 3 bullet points as to what you should say in your letter. So analyse the task first. Now, analysing the task is a habit that you need to get into for all the writing questions, whether it's the academic task 1, general training task 1, or the essays in task 2. Practice analysing the task first. So that means reading through the question about 4 or 5 times to really make sure that you understand what you have to do. Make sure that you cover all parts of the task, okay? A common mistake for candidates in this question is not to cover all the 3 bullet points. Now, make sure you cover all of those 3 bullet points and try to give an equal amount of detail for each point. Make the purpose of your letter as clear as you can, and pay attention that, as in this example, the test taker is asked to describe more than one problem. That first bullet point says, describe the problems. plural. So that doesn't mean you have to think of a whole list of problems. It just means more than one. So make sure you write about two. That's all you have to do is just two more. Just make sure it's more than one. The question tells you how to start the letter, so make sure that you follow the task instructions. And this will also give you a clue as to the style of letter you have to write. Is it going to be a formal letter, a semi-formal letter, or a personal letter? So it's really important to use the right style or tone when you write. If you look at the task achievement scale in the band descriptors, you'll see that you'll lose marks if the tone of your letter is not appropriate or consistent. So as you can see in this example, we have to begin our letter, dear sir or madam. So that tells us immediately that we're going to be writing a formal letter. So how do you approach the task? Well, as with any task, you have to set the scene and provide a context. So what you have to do first is make it clear what the purpose and the context of your letter is. So that's my first masterclass rule. State your purpose and then begin addressing the points in the task. Cover all those 3 bullet points fully, give an equal amount of attention to each bullet point, and maintain an appropriate tone. Now, looking at those band descriptors, this time for general training, what's the highest score you can get for task achievement if you don't cover all the bullet points in your letter? What's the highest score that you can get for task achievement if you don't cover all the bullet points in your letter? So again, don't look any higher than a band 5. Look at band 5 or below. Excuse me while I just cough for a second. All right, I'll come back to that answer. So let's see what you need to include at the beginning. So essentially for this particular task, you should include the purpose of your letter. So state your purpose and begin addressing the points in the task. Now remember, there were 2 problems that the writer had to describe. So they've said here that the roadworks have led to long delays in bus services, and the bus timetable has dramatically reduced the frequency of buses. So very simple, just 2 problems. Then they also had to describe the effect that this was having on people in the area. So again, because they've highlighted 2 problems, they're going to have to talk about 2 effects. So he's talked about the public transport taking longer to travel the length of the road, and also talking about how there's been a downturn in retail trade because not many people are going shopping now because of how long it takes. So 2 problems were described, 2 effects also need to be described. And then you were asked to make some suggestions. So again, it was a plural form of suggestions. So they're talking about rerouting the buses and going back to the old weekend timetable. So again, just 2 suggestions were made. You don't have to think of a long list. Just make sure it's more than 1. So this is a very good sample answer. There's been an equal amount of detail that's been given to each bullet point, and they've addressed all those 3 bullet points thoroughly. So I asked you before, what was the highest score for task achievement if you don't cover all those bullet points fully? Let me just share those results. The answer was a band 4, which most of you saw there. Attempts to address the task, but does not cover all the bullet points. For those of you who put a band 6 or a band 5, go back to those band descriptors and have another read through them again. All right, we had to write a formal letter. So these were some formal phrases that you could use that will help you to maintain an appropriate tone throughout the letter, whether it's formal or informal. That will depend on who you're writing to. The skill of maintaining an appropriate tone is also assessed in the task achievement scale. So if you don't use an appropriate tone, what's the highest score for task achievement that you can get? And the answer is a band 5. The tone may be variable while sometimes inappropriate. So let me just summarize my masterclass advice. Make sure that you analyze the task and make sure you check for any plural forms in the question. So it might be asking you to describe problems, not just one problem. Always state the purpose of your letter in the first paragraph. And letters do need paragraphs. So I would recommend you write 1 paragraph per bullet point. They don't have to be long paragraphs. Remember, you've only got 20 minutes to do this task. And make sure that you politely round off the letter. As I've said before, choosing the right tone for writing a letter to someone is a very important skill. That's the skill you're being tested on, so it's important to get it right. Avoid using the same words that are given in the instructions, so please don't copy any text in the questions into your answer. They won't be counted in your word count. You also need to make sure that you begin the letter as shown in the question. So if it's dear sir or madam, make sure you begin your letter dear sir or madam. If it's dear ... then you can insert your own name. So if you have to write a letter to your teacher, for example, asking for an extension for an assignment, please don't write dear teacher. Make sure you give your teacher a name, like dear Mr. Oliver or dear Miss Brown. You don't need to include the date or your address at the start of the letter. Okay, let's move on to task 2. We're going to be looking at the academic and the general training modules together, as they both consist of writing an essay. And let's begin by first looking at the different essay types that there are. There are 4 main essay types that you'll encounter. So it could be an opinion essay, a discussion essay, a multi-part question, or a multi-part question and opinion. So depending on the task, you might need to provide some general factual information, or you'll have to outline and present a solution or justify an opinion or evaluate evidence and ideas. These are skills that you're being tested on. Now we're going to have a look at 4 essay types, and they're all on a similar topic, a similar subject. But after analysing the task, you'll come to understand that you'll need a different approach to each of these questions, okay? Now, looking at the band descriptors, if you've got your masterclass pack there handy, look at the band descriptors for in the task response column. So this is looking at the band descriptors for task 2. In that first column, the task response column, if you have a look at band 7, the first thing it says in that criteria is addresses all parts of the task. So when we're going to read through these upcoming essay questions, the first question, as we're analysing the task, the first question I want you to ask yourself is, how many parts of this question do I need to address? This is a really important habit to get into, okay? So let's have a look at the first essay question, which is an opinion essay. Now, it's important to remember that the task 2 essay accounts for 2/3 of your writing mark. So make sure that you spend 40 minutes doing it. But you shouldn't start writing as soon as you see the task. First, you have to analyse the task to decide on the right approach to take, because different tasks require different approaches. So as I said before, looking at those and descriptors, how many parts of the task do you have to address in order to achieve a band 7? It says addresses all parts of the task. How many parts are there to this question? Some people believe the increasing popularity of shopping as a leisure activity is a positive trend. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this opinion? Now, as you're reading this question, you might be thinking, how many parts do I have to address? You might be thinking 2, but it's an or question. To what extent do you agree or disagree? So this type of question only requires your position. It must be well developed with plenty of supporting ideas, but it doesn't require the opposing viewpoint to be discussed. You could provide a balanced essay if you wanted to talk about both sides, but your opinion, the writer's position, must be clearly and consistently expressed throughout. So when we approach essay writing 101, you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have a body which will consist of 2 or 3 paragraphs, depending on how much you write, and you're going to have a conclusion. So remember, in your introduction, tell the reader what you're going to tell them. Use the body of your essay to tell them. And then your conclusion, tell them what you've told them. Okay, this is the overall structure of an essay. Introduction, tell them what you're going to tell them. Use the body of your essay to tell them. And the conclusion, tell them what you've told them. So make sure you state your opinion in the introduction. Use the body of the essay to support the reasons why you think this way. And then in the conclusion, state again what you think and why you think it. Okay? Let's have a look at another question. Again, similar topic. And as you're analysing it, ask yourself, how many parts of this task are there? Some people believe the increasing popularity of shopping as a leisure activity is a positive trend. Others believe it is harmful to individuals. Discuss both these views and give your own opinion. So when we ask ourselves, how many parts are there to this task? The answer is 3, because you're going to have to talk about why some people think the popularity of shopping as a leisure activity is positive. You're going to have to talk about why some people think it's harmful, and then you're going to have to talk about what you think. So that's 3 parts to that essay. And again, same structure, introduction, tell them what you're going to tell them. Use the body of your essay to tell them. And the conclusion, tell them what you've told them. So I would structure this type of essay after my introduction. I'd probably have 3 paragraphs. I'd have 1 paragraph talking about why shopping as a leisure activity is positive. I'd probably have another paragraph to talk about why it's harmful to individuals. And then I'd probably have a paragraph saying what I think, and then my conclusion. All right, that's another question. This type of question is quite typical of what you'll get on in the general training module. It's a multi-part question and essay. Now, the topics in the general training module tend to be less academic in nature and more practical and everyday. And like I said, having 2 questions to answer is typical of a task 2. Now, if we analyse this task, how many parts are there to this task? Shopping is becoming more and more popular as a leisure activity. However, some people feel that this has both positive and negative effects, plural. Why is shopping so popular? What effects, plural, does its increase in popularity have on individuals and society? So if we look at how many parts are there to this task, the answer is 3, because you're going to have to present an opinion on the popularity of shopping. That's one part you'll have to talk about. And then you have to discuss how this popularity has an effect on individuals and society. Okay, so that means there's 3 parts to this question. If you were to look back at those band descriptors, what's the highest score you can get if you only write about why shopping is so popular, or if you only write about the effect shopping has on society? If you have a look at those band descriptors, it'll say band 5 addresses the task only partially. Now, whether you do academic or general training module, if you only address part of the task, you'll only get a band 5. Okay. Now let's look at one more essay type, which was the multi-part essay and opinion. So how many parts are there to this question? As I said before, it's important to analyse the task first to decide on the approach. There are problems with the increasing popularity of shopping as a leisure activity. What form do these problems, plural, what form do these problems take? Do the problems outweigh the benefits of shopping as a leisure activity? So again, you'll have to write about at least 2 problems and talk about if you think these problems outweigh the benefits, why. So the 2 parts are describing any problems that are associated with the increasing popularity of shopping as a leisure activity, and an opinion about whether the problems outweigh the benefits. To address all parts of the task to get a band 7, you must cover both parts and you must focus on shopping as a leisure activity. So you can see that a different approach is needed from the previous task. Okay. The essay is the main struggle point for most candidates when they take the IELTS test. So doing thorough practice and becoming familiar with analysing the task and the different essay types is really, really important. But during the writing module, make sure that you allocate your time properly. Remember that task 2 is worth twice as much as task 1. So make sure you devote at least 40 minutes to the task 2. And you must have an opinion. That's the language skill you're being assessed on. So decide on your position and express your views clearly and provide support. You've got to have good reasons to say why you think this way. Organise your ideas into paragraphs and make sure that each paragraph has a clear focus. So each paragraph, the first sentence should be the topic sentence for that paragraph. And then you have some supporting sentences for that first sentence for that first topic sentence. Try to use a wide range of vocabulary and grammatical styles. Get into the habit of analysing the task first. Okay. Use a variety of linking words to connect your ideas and sequence your ideas together. You've got to write in connected text and format your essay appropriately. So don't write in note form or don't use headings or bullet points or any numbered lists. And if you've got time at the end of that 40 minutes, make sure that you check your work carefully. Okay. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, you've got to make the most of the opportunity to use English. The University of Melbourne did some interesting research where they followed 63 students over a long period of time. They gave them an IELTS test at the beginning of their study time and at the end of their course. And the research revealed that some students who'd been speaking in their native language each day actually had a lower level of English skills even after 3 years of living in Australia. So it's vital that you push yourself and you use English every day. Check which module is going to be best suited to you, the academic or the general training module. You've got your masterclass pack there, so you know how you'll be scored. Keep those band descriptors handy. and read them so that you become familiar with the criteria that you're being assessed on. And also remember what I said too about IELTS preparation courses, which, if you're new to the test, they're very helpful for teaching you what to expect on each part of the test, but they only maximize the English skills that you already have. IELTS preparation courses don't help to improve your English language. To achieve an IELTS Band 7, it actually represents thousands of hours of learning English. And research has also been done that it takes a minimum of 3 months of intensive English language training to move from one band score to another. So that's 5 days of full-time English language study for 3 months in order to improve. So take a long-term approach, and remember just to push yourself and do anything that you can in English. This is a good slide to take a snapshot of because it gives you some websites to find some more information on. The IELTSessentials.com website is very useful. There's also a Facebook page where it's interactive and you can have some questions answered. There's plenty of stuff on YouTube as well. There's an official IELTS practice test online. So it's go to IELTSprogresscheck.com. I think it costs money. I think it's around $65 to do this test, but you do receive a detailed report with indicative band scores for each part of the test. So I hope you found this masterclass useful. I'm going to go to your questions now. Oops, and I'll turn on my video so that you can see me, hopefully. You might not be able to. Okay, so Chineri Achuku has asked, can I mention I disagree? Can I mention a disagree idea in my thesis statement while mentioning to agree ideas, developing them into my body paragraphs? Chinyere, I would probably say stick to one point of view because it just makes it easier for you rather than saying you agree with. Well, you're able to say that you agree partially with something, but again, you're going to have an opinion of overall of what you think. That's the language skill that you're being tested on. Please don't use phrases like, well, it's up to the individual what they think. Every person is different. We know that. What you're being tested on is your opinion and how well you can express it. So if you feel confident, partially agreeing and disagreeing, then fine. Tam Lam has asked, should we use the passive tense in writing task 2? Well, I would probably not write in the passive tense. I would say the only time we would use the passive tense would be in the academic task 1 if you're given a process that you need to describe. I would use more active tense in the essay. Tam Lam has also asked, may I use a structure in task 2 with 2 sentences in both introduction and conclusion parts? Well, for a paragraph to be considered a paragraph, it needs to be more than 2 sentences, Tam. So your introduction and conclusion should be at least 3 sentences. Yuan Lee has asked, hi, what kind of examples would be desired to be used in IELTS exam statistics? My real life example or professor stated language? Well, I would use real life examples, Yuan Lee, because that's easier than making up some numbers. Just provide, I think the essay question will always say provide examples from your own experience. You've also asked me, could I provide some useful and relevant websites? Well, I showed you that slide with the IELTSessentials.com website. You can look up things on YouTube. That will be very helpful. Aishwari Talhan has asked, hello, is this fine? Oops, I just lost your question. Is this fine to use fake examples or numbers to support ideas in the essay? I don't think you need to get that technical with numbers. I would just say many people feel this way, rather than give statistics. The examiners know that you'll be making up those numbers anyway. So it's not, you don't need to make up essays. You're asked to provide relevant examples from your own experience. Holly Theodora has asked, do we have to put an overview in the last paragraph for task 1? Holly, the overview can come anywhere in that report. I mean, not right at the beginning, of course. You must have your introduction first, but you can put it after your introduction. It can come in the middle or it can come at the end. Hania Pania has also asked the same question about the overview being the last paragraph. Like I said, it doesn't matter where it comes in the report, just make sure you have it. Disha Patel has also asked, in some sample answers I show there is an overview is written right after the introduction. You can have the overview right after the introduction if you want to. Tamland, again, a lot of you are asking about that overview for task 1. It can be at the end, like a conclusion if you wanted to, but it can also come after the introduction or in the middle of the report. Just make sure that you have it there. Ashwari Talhan has asked, hi, I'm aiming for general training. Generally in technical writing, it is recommended that to avoid passive sentences. I would like to know how active and passive sentences are evaluated in IELTS. Ashwara, you might have heard me answer another question previously about the passive tense. I think we would only really find that used in the in the academic task 1 process style question. You're not assessed on active and passive sentences per se. You won't see any of that in the band descriptors. Examiners will be focusing more on your grammar structures, how accurate your grammar structures are, and how many structures you've been able to use accurately. Nia has asked, is it important to write a conclusion for each body paragraphs? I'm not sure. I don't think I really understand your question there, Nia. In your essay, you have an introduction, you have the body of your essay, which might be 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then you have a conclusion. So you don't have conclusions in the paragraph. You only have the conclusion is the final paragraph of the essay. Tolga Dinskoy has asked, do you think you can start the writing exam with task 2? Is it a wise move? Tolga, that's up to you on which module, which task you want to do first. Some people do prefer writing the essay first. That's totally up to you and what you're comfortable with. Just remember that you've got 40 minutes for task 2 and 20 minutes for task 1. So make sure that you allocate your time appropriately. Anonymous has asked, is it okay to partially agree on both the points? Yes, it's okay to partially agree. You just have to say why. You'll always be asked to give reasons to support your answers. So just so long as you can justify it, that's fine. Jinghui Liang has asked, hi Tina, may I ask that in the task 2, when the requirement is discuss both views and give your own opinion, do we give our own opinion in a body paragraph, which has a topic sentence and several supporting sentences? Or do we only write body paragraphs for the 2 views and just simply state our own opinion in the last conclusion paragraph, like in one sentence. Well, Jinqui, that's totally up to you. I would say present your opinion in the introduction. I would, again, I would probably use my conclusion to expand more on what my opinion is and why I think that. So it's totally up to you how you structure your essay. Anonymous has asked, hi Tina, is it okay that it's more important to elaborate on my opinions over general knowledge, meaning my points might not be accurate based on actual data? Yes, Anonymous, that's fine. You're not being asked to present data in the essay. It's just using supporting evidence from your own experience. So you don't need to use any data in the task 2 essay. Venapreet Kaur has asked, can I please view the Japanese tourist travelling answer 1 again, please? That's in your masterclass pack, Venapreet. So you'll have that answer there in the masterclass pack. Anonymous has asked, with the essay, similar to formal letter, is it important to stay consistent with style and numbers? Well, I doubt you'll be using numbers in your essay, but your style is important. So you want to maintain, and the tone of your essay is also important. So you want to have a more academic tone for the academic training module, and you can be a bit more personal in the general training module. Chiara Lincini has asked, or Lincini has asked, dear Tina, when expressing my opinion on the discussion or multi-part and opinion essay, where should I state it? Overview or conclusion? If you've got a multi-part and opinion essay, I would always state my opinion in the introduction, Chiara, okay? Not in the multi-part opinion and essay, okay? And state it again in your conclusion. Remember that structure I gave you for the essay. In the introduction, tell the reader what you're going to tell them. Use the body of your essay to tell them, and the conclusion to tell them what you've told them. Anonymous has said, for task 1, you mentioned that we should give an introduction in one sentence, which should form the first paragraph. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you also mentioned that a paragraph should have at least 3 sentences. Is it okay to have just one sentence in the introduction just to answer the what, where, and the when? Look, the task 1 report is very, very different to the task 2 essay, Anonymous. And because task 1 is only 150 words, you're not going to technically have proper paragraphs per se, because your introduction and your overview are just one sentence. So you can't really think about them as being paragraphs. Okay, but a paragraph for the writing needs to have at least, for the essay, needs to have at least 3 sentences to be considered a proper paragraph. Anika Karim has asked, should we put our opinion in the intro paragraph for task 2 or in the body paragraph first line? I would put my opinion in the introduction. Remember, you're going to tell the reader what you're going to tell them in the introduction. Erdem Safak has asked, bar chart and graph questions for academic or general training? The bar chart and the graph questions are for the academic task 1, Erdem. The task 1 general training module is always a letter. Vadim Kolosov has asked, please address our dramatic use of 1 or 2 informal words in informal text is. I don't understand your question, Vadim. I'm not really sure what you mean by dramatic use of 1 or 2 informal words. You want to keep the style and the tone of your academic essay suited to the academic style. Yes, someone told me that I use the 70% agree and 30% disagree method. Imelda Zvitzi has said that. If that works for you, Imelda, it depends on the question type. And you might strongly agree with the question type, or you might strongly disagree. So it really does depend on the question of the day. Odem Safak has asked, for agree or disagree questions, do we need to select one of them? Or can we say there are points I agree and some points I disagree? Again, you can, if you are going to partially agree and disagree with certain points, you need to be able to say why. That's totally fine. Aditya has asked, do short forms or abbreviations make a difference on the score for task 1 and task 2? I wouldn't use short forms or abbreviations. I'd always use the full word. I wouldn't use acronyms or anything like that in either of the tasks. Aditya has asked, for the letter, Tina, you said 170, 180 max. What's this range for task 2? Well, task 2, you've got 250 words, so I would make 250 words my minimum, and between 270 and 280 the maximum, okay? Again, don't necessarily think that the more you write, the higher you'll score. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down because I can't delete the questions as I've answered them, so I'm getting confused. Richard Crabb has asked, if you need a band 7 in all 4 cohorts and you miss out on one, for example, the writing, why is one not allowed to take only the writing test in the next attempt? That's a very good question, Richard, and it's frustrating, but that's not how IELTS works. They make you take the whole test again. That's just the rules and just the way it is. I wish it was different, but unfortunately it's not. Someone has asked, do we need to read the business newspaper to help us improve? Our task 1, that's from Pranay Mehra. I think any reading that you do in English is going to help you. Okay. So you might get an idea of how reports are structured if you read the business newspapers. So I think any reading that you do any reading that you do in English is going to help you. Tam Lam has asked, may I use structure 2552 in task 2, which 2 sentences for introduction, 2 for conclusion, 5 sentences for body 1 and 5 sentences for body 2. Tam Lam, there's no formula for writing an essay. Okay, so it really depends on the question and it really depends on how you approach the answer. So if you feel comfortable with that structure, but I would use more than 2 sentences for the introduction and the conclusion. I'd probably try to write 3. Linda Stanley has asked, if they don't ask specifically for my opinion in writing 2, would you still write it? I think you'll always be asked for your opinion, Linda. That's the writing skill you're being tested on. So I doubt you'll come across a question where you're not asked for what you think. So giving your opinion is the language skill you're being tested on in the writing task 2. Anonymous has asked, is a conclusion mandatory for Task 1 academic? Well, it's not called a conclusion, Anonymous. It's called an overview. And yes, it's mandatory. You've got to make sure that you have one. Oh, someone has said the masterclass pack example essay for academic writing task 1 is not for the Japanese tourists. It was for cinema attendants. No, it's not. No, my apologies. I thought you had the same question in your masterclass pack as what we present on the slides. My apologies for that. If you wanted to see the academic task 1 again, the bar chart, there it is. So, and if you wanted to have a look at the answers, at how they structured the answer, there was the introduction. There was the bar chart described. Oh no, there was the line graph described. And there was the overview. Okay. So I hope that's helped everyone. So Ashwari Talhan has asked, can we create our own examples to support ideas in the writing task? Yes, you're being asked, you will be asked to support evidence from your own experience. So that will be fine. What's the difference? Tam Lam has asked, what's the difference between an overview and a conclusion in task 1 academic? Well, a conclusion is usually what we have in an essay. Okay, we call it an overview in academic task 1 because the overview is just a summary of everything that you've just written. And it's a 1-sentence summary of what you've just included in the report. So think of it as the most important information in a nutshell. Linda Stanley has asked, do I have to write a hook in the introduction? Well, you can write a hook that will keep the reader interested. But again, it depends on the question. Just make sure you stick to that structure that I gave you. In the introduction, tell them what you're going to tell them. Use the body of the essay to tell them and the conclusion to tell them what you've told them. Anonymous has asked, suppose a person is unfamiliar with the topic, then how should he tackle it? Are there any specific topics in which we can brush up on? Look, all of the topics that are on the IELTS test have been trialled extensively have been trialled extensively on students before they go live in the tests. So it's very unusual that you'll come across a subject that you won't be able to write about, okay? So there aren't any specific subjects that you need to brush up on per se. They're all general knowledge based. Okay, so I think that we have now come to the end of the questions. So I'd like to thank you all for participating in the webinar. We also have another webinar for the listening, speaking and reading module, which are free. So you're welcome to sign up for those. I wish you well in your IELTS preparation. And remember, prior planning prevents poor performance. So I do wish you all well and thank you for joining us. Bye for now.